Allison Rosen. Allison Rosen is your new best friend. Allison, with her the good times never end. Allison Rosen, doing the wavy pencil dance again. Allison Rosen, Allison's your new best friend.
Hey everyone. Hi. Hello. Welcome to another episode of Allison Rosen is your new best friend. I am very excited to welcome my guest to the show. I will bring him in just one moment. Now, normally this is the part of the show where I would be chatting with producer and self-professed bad boy of podcasting. Yes, a nickname he gave himself, Tony Thaxton, but he's filling in on drums at a show right now. So he's not here for me to make fun of the nickname that he gave himself. So I'll just have to give you guys the Tony update. I think he's good. Evidently, he's very busy with I don't know what. So busy that he was able to go to Disneyland yesterday. How busy is that really? Anyway, so that's the Tony update. Okay, now on to I have a personal update though. I've started a newsletter. Everyone has a newsletter, and now so do I. Look, I started it on a newsletter service called Review that has like an integration with Twitter. I do not love Review so far. If Review is listening, get your shit together. You're going to lose me. I'm going to go to Substack. That's what I think I'm going to do. So, if you're hearing this and you're thinking, I just love her attitude. It's so positive and cheery, and I want to read more of what she has to say. An issue I'm having with Review is I can't just say, yeah, go. Like if I try to give you the URL, it's very long, which that will be fixed once I move over to the other one. But I've been tweeting it out. So if you follow me on Twitter, at Allison Rosen on Twitter, you can find the subscription link. And so far, I would say people have been very pleased with my 2 newsletter issues that I've put out so far. Someone texted me today and said they experienced a couple sensible chuckles, but they said it in like the way of like they were laughing their head off, but the word said sensible chuckles. So, you know, you might laugh your head off. It might be a couple restrained, just a couple like just tight-lipped tee-hees. You never know what to expect. Okay, now, but I do know the kind of laughs, the kind of unbridled guffaws you can experience if you read the work of our next guest, of our only guest on this very episode. He is incredible. He's so prolific. He could put anyone to shame, you guys. He has written, and I hope this count is correct. He can let me know in a moment. By my count, based off his website, 9 books that he's written. He's contributed to 7 books. He does a podcast. He is a comedy writer. Now, I, back in my journalism days, would say I'm a music writer. And then people would be like, oh, what have you, like thinking I was a composer. And it was just this syntactical confusion that came from saying music writer. Hence, I started saying I write about music, or like I'm a music journalist, which then some people think is pretentious. But he's a comedy writer, and he actually writes about comedy, but also writes comedy. He does it all, you guys. Please put your hands together for Mike Sachs.
Thank you. Boy, you made me sound competent.
You're more than competent. I don't think I realized I had a sense of how prolific you were, but I don't think I realized just how insanely prolific you are. What's going on? Whose mind are you trying to change?
It's depression and anxiety and OCD. And there's only 3 things that help alleviate depression and anxiety for me: exercise, alcohol, and writing every day. That's it.
And
that's it.
Do you still engage in exercise and alcohol?
Yes.
Okay. But see, some people might just go all the way with alcohol and stop doing the other ones. It seems like you found a balance.
Yeah. Well, for a long time, I didn't. Well, I shouldn't say for a long time. I would say for maybe 5-6 years after college, I look back at it as being my fat Elvis period. I was circling the drain a bit. I was very depressed, very anxious, terrible OCD, and wasn't exercising, wasn't being creative. and I was drinking. I used to live in New Orleans, so it's not hard to be an alcoholic in New Orleans. But what I did find eventually is that the OCD that I have is an energy, and if you can funnel it in the right direction, which I try to do now, it can be used to your advantage. And I found that by forcing myself to write every day and to feel uncomfortable if I don't accomplish something every day, you can use it to your benefit. And that's what I've been doing these past 15 years or so. It's just every day I have to accomplish something or I'm a mess. And rather than being, like I was, and like unfortunately a lot of OCD people are, and depressed people, very insular in their own lives and not accomplishing anything, I do think it's an energy, and I do think you can use it to your advantage. So I do try to do that. And I do try to, exercise, by doing those two, it can sort of tamp down the need for alcohol. But I've found that those three things, alcohol, creativity, and exercise, are really the only things that help me anyway with depression.
I do want to get into some of that, the darkness, if we can call it that, which I think we can. But with the writing, are you attached to the results, to the reaction people are going to have to the writing?
No, I don't know the results. It's a very solitary endeavor because I write alone, and people read these things that I write alone. So it's not like I've ever seen anyone read these things that I write on the subway. I mean, I have opened for David Sedaris a few times. We're friendly, and he's very graciously allowed me to open for him. And in that case, you can hear the reaction immediately. But I have to say, I kind of like not hearing the reaction because you can push more. You can try to get away with things that you wouldn't otherwise. You can take chances. Mm-hmm. And I don't necessarily think a lot of what I write is maybe laugh out loud funny, but it's what interests me to write and also to read. So it's not like I have to appease a live audience at a late night show or at a live concert. I can do things that are maybe more literary and more dry, more dry than it would be if I had to do it live. Mm-hmm. Some of my favorite jokes that I wrote for these pieces that I did read live didn't get a reaction. And it was interesting to go through this experience because writing for a live audience is totally different than writing for an audience who are going to be reading inwardly, who, could read a book in bed, say, or an article on a subway. So it's just a different type of writing. But I do think, in the end, I do prefer writing for the written page rather than for a live audience. Mm-hmm. It's a totally different beast.
So you have been published. You've been published everywhere. Vanity Fair, New York Times, New Yorker, McSweeney's. Just all the ones, all the prestigious places that one would want to be published. You have been published there. And then additionally, you have all these hilarious books that you've written. Which type of writing came first?
Oh, well, that's interesting because I never got into writing to are you living in a treehouse? Where are you where the birds chirping?
I'm in Burbank in a treehouse. Yeah.
I'm in Brooklyn. There's no, I think the rutting of raccoons you might be hearing in the alleyway behind me. But no, I got into writing to get into comedy writing. I never got into it for the journalistic. I was never in a part of a newspaper. I was never, in high school or college. That was never a dream of mine. I just sort of stumbled into it because I didn't know any other way I needed to earn money, freelance money, and I didn't know how else to do it. My original goal was to write for Letterman or SNL, and I thought by writing funny pieces for the page, I would be called up like one would in the major leagues from the minor leagues in baseball. And that's not how it works. But that's all I knew because I didn't know anyone in the business and my parents didn't know anyone. I had no one to ask. So I sort of had to stumble my way through it. So I did write, and I worked for the Washington Post as an editor. I edited George Will and Jane Bryant Quinn and David Broder and all the columnists, and just sort of stumbled into that, and then also stumbled into interviewing comedy writers. I mean, that came by accident, really. And it's funny because in some ways I'm best known for that, but in no way did I want to be known as an interviewer. And the only reason I went after these comedy writers to interview was I just, for selfish reasons, I wanted to know what they would recommend for me.
It was like informational interviews for you.
Yeah, for me it was. And that was one part of it. Another part was that I knew a lot of these old-time writers, this was the late 90s, were dying off. It was like the early jazz musicians. And I wanted to reach out to them and talk to them before they passed away. And, they really were a bridge to another time, whether they wrote for Bob Hope or the Marx Brothers or early radio. I love that stuff. And I wanted to, make a connection with them. So interviewing really was not something I wanted to do as a career. And I was sort of really taken aback by how much people liked the interviews. I never thought of myself as a journalist. It was always as a comedy writer. But what I tried to do with those interviews is one of my pet peeves is when you read interviews with comedy people is that the interviewer...
When you say interviews... And sorry, I'm interrupting you.
No, it's fine. Yeah.
But do you mean specifically in a question and answer format?
Yes.
Okay.
I wanted it to be in their words. I didn't want it to be through the prism of my words as an article. I wanted it to be a strict Playboy type or Paris Review type Q&A.
So
and
question answer.
Well, exactly. Right. With a little introduction to start with. But I wanted it in their words. And I didn't want to be a part of it. I mean, one of my pet peeves is with interviewers of comedy people, and this is something you do not do, and because you're a very good interviewer, but oftentimes the interviewer will try to outsmart or outfunny the interviewee. And it's something that has always bothered me. So I always thought, like, these are my guests. They're over my house, an imaginary house. The interview is theirs. It's not mine. I don't want to be funny or too clever. I want all in their words. And that's what I tried to do with both of the books. I put out 2 books of interviews. But it really was, at first, a way for me to connect with these people. And also, I didn't know... I always looked for books like this, and I never really could find them. I could find books on interviews, say, with writers for Your Show of Shows or Saturday Night Live, but I couldn't find anything that was more current, that influenced me, whether it was Letterman or Mr. Show or The Simpsons or Cheers or what have you. And I just wanted to put out something that might have interested me as a kid in high school who was interested in comedy, especially with writers, not necessarily performers, but like, who puts this together? How does one become a writer for comedy? And that is what always interested me. How does one find or have their name on the end scroll at the end of a sitcom or on a late night show? It was just a mystery to me. I didn't know how one did it because I didn't know anyone in the industry. So I wanted to put out a book, and my ideal reader was a kid in high school who would stumble on this book, say in the library as they were skipping math class. That to me was the ideal reader. So it was sort of a selfish reason to put out these books. But ironically, I sort of became known as the interviewer of comedy writers. And that's not something I ever set out to be. That was never my goal. I didn't want to make a career at that.
Right. These books specifically being Here's the Kicker and Poking the Frog, right?
Yes.
So then you have carved this amazing career out for yourself as the interviewer of comedy people, oftentimes comedy legends who won't open up to other comedy writers. And then also this other career as, writing these books, these hilarious books, and we'll get into all that. But does some part of you wish that you had become a writer for late night or a writer for SNL?
That's a good question. I do feel that I wish I had done it, but knowing and being friendly with so many people who have done it, I don't think I would have liked it. I mean, these so-called ideal jobs, whether it's writing for SNL or Letterman when he was still around, or sitcoms, there's no ideal job. And I've worked so independently now for so long, 25 years now, that I don't think I would fit into that realm. I mean, I grew up, I think like most people, looking at the writer's room of your show of shows, or the first season of SNL or The Simpsons, as being this sort of magical land that you could go in every day and laugh with friends and produce great work.
Yes.
That does happen every once in a while, but most jobs are pretty difficult, and you go in and you may not respect the head writer, and you may not respect the other writers, and your jokes may not get in, and you may feel frustrated. So I do wish that I had maybe been on a season of something, but, and that was really my goal in writing for print, was to get noticed and get called up. And that never really happened. But I have sort of fused at a very specific niche for myself. And I don't know if I could do that these days. I don't know if I could go into a room every day, having worked for myself. There is something to be said for putting out what you want, how you want to do it. And just moving on down that road, there's a freedom that I would miss. Now, there are definitely advantages to writing for TV, and that the main one would be money. And it can be sometimes of a struggle to produce enough where one makes a living. But I just think the freedom of doing what one wants, to me, is worth perhaps not having as much money as I would say writing for a sitcom that wouldn't interest me.
Yeah. So you wanted to be a comedy writer, but you got a job at the Washington Post as an editor of columnist. How did that happen?
Well, what happened was I was down in New Orleans after school for a number of years, and drinking and eating fast food.
Your Elvis period.
My fat Elvis period. And I eventually moved back to where I was from, which is Northern Virginia and D.C. and Maryland, and worked in a record store, and just sort of mediocred my way into the Washington Post. I was working as an editor at an association just to make money. From there, I was working at Night Ritter, which was a nightly news service that would wire out articles to various newspapers across the country. Then I worked as a temp at the Washington Post, and snuck into the employment office at the Washington Post, which you're not supposed to do. And really the only reason I got hired at the Post was I knew a very, very ancient word processing program called Xywrite, which was even before Word. So it was just luck. It was just luck that I sort of got into that. And from there, because of the Washington Post, I got a job at Vanity Fair. And because I was at Vanity Fair, I met New Yorker editors. It was just a lot of stumbling my way through the darkness, because I just didn't know how to do it. And that's one of the reasons why I like to give advice to young writers, is like, save yourself some time and avoid all the shit that I had to do, because I didn't know. It was a mystery to me, but it doesn't have to be a mystery to everyone. Mm-hmm. And I just had to sort of figure it out for myself.
Where did you go to school?
Tulane.
Did you like it?
I love the city of New Orleans. I mean, I didn't do well grade-wise. I was mostly in the city. It was a little too fraternity-oriented for me. But I do love the fact that I got to live in New Orleans.
So let's talk about Passing on the Right for a bit. I do want to get into, before I let you go, which is not going to happen for a while, so settle in.
Good. But no, I'm settled. Let's do this.
I do want to get into the OCD and the depression and some of the stuff that came up when you were on our group show a while ago about Munchausen's and that kind of stuff. So we have a lot of stuff to get into. But I do want to talk about Passing on the Right, which is your latest book with, Kurt Braunohler, one of my favorites.
Love him.
Portraying Skippy Batty Battison. Batty Battison.
Skippy Batty Battison.
Skippy Batty Battison.
Yes, I don't think I remembered that.
A comedian turned shock-jock podcaster who's become right. You explain it. You can explain it better. I think I worked for this man, possibly.
We all have at some point. I mean, it was basically every asshole I've ever worked with whom I did not like, and every person I grew up with in D.C. Who, entitled pricks who became GOP. I grew up not far from Kavanaugh, where Brett Kavanaugh grew up. I knew people who went to Georgetown Prep. I mean, this was years after he was there. But I know that type very, very well. I mean, it's a very specific DC type. And in fact, the party where he was accused of raping the woman, and I'm sure he did, there's no doubt in my mind that he raped that poor woman, is maybe 5 miles from where I grew up. So it's an area that I knew really well. So I wanted to combine everything that bothered me with politics with everything that bothered me in comedy, which I've been seeing recently, which is a leaning towards the right, which I never noticed before. I mean, I got into comedy. I think most people got into comedy of my generation and before to get away from these fucking pricks, not to have to work with these assholes anymore. And to see a Jim Brewer or any of the Dennis Miller, any of these assholes who are now to the right of everyone else, it just surprised me because it was something I had never seen before. I mean, beyond that, Jesse Waters is his name from Fox, and Gutfeld from Fox. I mean, it just astonished me really that this could. I mean, not that someone would do what they're doing, but it would achieve some level of success. I mean, when you see Jesse Waters go to Chinatown, which he did on a segment, or go, make fun of Asian people with the sound of a gong and do karate moves, or go to Penn Station and literally mock the homeless. When I was coming up, comedians would try to help the homeless. You felt for those who were not at a level of where they probably could be or should be, and you never mocked those who were beneath you. And this whole new philosophy of going after those beneath
punching down.
Yeah, and people talk about punching down, and I don't know if they really understand it, but to go to a Penn Station and mock those who are homeless, I just found it such cruelty. To me, comedy is just the opposite. I mean, you always go after those in power. You always go after a Trump or a Putin or a Ted Cruz or any of these assholes. You don't go after some poor guy or woman who is homeless in Penn Station. So that to me was a totally new realm. And I wanted to combine the politics with the comedy, both of which I despised. And I created out of that this one character who sort of encompasses everything that I hate right now in those two realms.
That's so interesting that he is of a type and that he's an archetype. Because did you ever listen to the Adam Carolla show?
I know him a little bit just from listening to him over the years. I can't figure him out. There's a cruelty there. And what I don't understand about Adam is that he's a very smart guy who came up very blue collar. I don't understand the meanness. And it's just like a cruelty. And that's what bothers me. To me, the best comedy is always character based, whether it's even an extension of a character. If you're a stand-up, say Richard Pryor or Woody Allen or whomever, but it's always based off of decency, and it's never out of cruelty. And I can't imagine any of these comedians lasting through the years because I can't imagine people wanting to hear their material years from now.
Right.
I mean, yeah.
I'm too close to, because I was the news girl on the Carolla show for 4 years, so I'm like too close to it to be to have any perspective. But there was some stuff at the very beginning of the book that was so close to stuff that Adam would say that I was like,
wow,
you
really?
have
Like
to be
what?
lampooning Adam. The stuff about so Skippy talking about having been in the writer's room for Shit My Dad Says, and his jokes his jokes being cut because Shatner's character had to be likable, and that back in my day characters didn't have to be likable. This word likable. And Adam would talk all the time about Archie Bunker didn't have to be likable.
But he was, though. See, that was the genius of the writing, that he was likable.
Right.
Because he was ignorant, but he got his comeuppance either through Edith or his son. That is what I think people don't understand. Assholes are not likable. And, you know, Archie Bunker was an asshole, but within the realm of an ignorance that one was learning something from. And just having a straight fucking asshole mocking people doesn't interest anyone. And there's a reason why this type of writer, be it Adam Carolla or Skippy Batty Battison, aren't making it and then blaming the world, is because they're assholes and no one wants to watch a mean comedy writer or comedian. I don't anyway.
Yeah.
It doesn't last. It doesn't resound. There's no meaning to it. I mean, there's a reason why right wing does not go with comedy. There's a reason for that. Just like there's our rules for cooking and there's rules for melody. You know, things just don't go together. And I truly believe that right wing and comedy is not a combination that is going to last. I think it's part of the current zeitgeist because of where we are right now, but I think it's very much a lesser form. And I don't think people will be studying it in the future beyond look at how awful this was.
Yeah, I don't disagree.
I mean, can I ask you questions about that? I mean, did you sense, I mean, so here's a guy who grew up blue collar in New England, obviously had a difficult childhood. In a lot of ways,
Wait, are you talking about Adam?
Yeah.
He grew up in California.
Oh, I thought he grew up in New England.
No.
Okay. So, but he had a difficult childhood.
Yes.
He was blue collar.
Yes.
I mean, so why the meanness of going against those who might be looked at as not being his equal? I mean, what is it about? Is it an anger? Is it a jealousy from his part? Where does that anger and meanness come from?
I mean, I don't really know. He's really mad at his parents. They espoused, I think they were on welfare at times, and they espoused kindness, and they didn't take care of him or show interest in him in the way he wishes that they should have. They were liberal. And so I think he feels that everything that he achieved came despite them and that their system doesn't work. And he did everything himself. He pulled himself up by his bootstraps. And like, look, this kumbaya system doesn't work. Fuck that. It's, shame works and tough love works and, calling things, the truth works and not all this like, euphemistic sort of squishy liberal bullshit.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear that because you hear people like Bill Clinton or whomever who come up with terrible childhoods who go in the opposite direction, who say, my childhood was terrible. And that because of that, I understand what people are going through. It just interests me where people end up. I mean, we've all had
I think he's challenged in the empathy department.
Yeah.
I have not seen him express or I've not personally seen a lot of empathy come from him. I don't know how much he's capable of.
Yeah, and I think you really need it when you're a comedy writer because there's so much shit out there. And, I think comedy writers smell the shit more clearly if you're a good writer. And whether it's the way animals are treated or the way this segment of society is treated or that segment of society, there's so much to go after. It just seems so strange to go after those who want to make, I mean, they may not be right politically as far as his parents or, far left or what have you, but to go after them with such anger, I think is the wrong route. And that interests me. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to write this book. I mean, this character, Skippy Battison, grew up very privileged in Bethesda, Maryland, which is a rich area where Brett Kavanaugh lived. And he still has a chip on his shoulder, which I've seen on a lot of people who grew up rich, and they take it out on certain groups. And I've seen this personally. I grew up with this. And that's one of the things I wanted to go after too. Like, here's a rich dude who is all he does is blame his parents, even though they've done nothing but give him money and enable him to have this career that he wants to have.
I think there's also rippling through that entire swath. There's a bit of, and this is a term that I've only recently kind of learned, but a narcissistic defense. So this idea of like I'm gonna. Actually, you know what? I feel like I shouldn't even use the term because I'm not exactly sure I'm using it correctly, but like, I'm going to hate you first. Like, I feel rejected by you, so I hate all of that. Like, I think that, and I think that I see that in the people that begin to swing right. It's like they felt rejected by the left.
Well, we all did in high school. And I think, one of the things I love about comedy is you eventually find your group. Mm-hmm. I remember not fitting in high school. I think most people didn't. But with comedy, you find your own family. You find those who were ostracized in high school, whether, they weren't good at sports, or they had a hair lip, or they were homosexual, or they were this, or they were that. And it doesn't matter when you get out in the real world. I mean, if you are talented in comedy, it's like music. I mean, musicians don't care what you are as long as you're a good musician. And comedy people are the same way. And, we were all ostracized. But to me, comedy is finding your group and finding that group of people you didn't find back in high school and moving forward and sort of doing good and going after the people who went after you in high school. It's not to remain angry at the world. And I don't think good comedy only comes through goodness. And I think you have to have your lodestar in the right direction, whether you're a comedian or a writer. And if it's not in the right direction, I don't think it's going to last. I don't think any of this, the meanness, is going to last. You read these playwrights from 2,000 years ago, Aristophanes or whomever, and it was always going after the rich politicians, always going after the assholes. Mm-hmm. And that, Charlie Chaplin, Woody Allen, any of these comedic characters that last are always based in decency. And it just surprises me because, a lot of these guys, Adam and Dave Chappelle, they're brilliant guys. It just surprises me that they focus on certain things and they sort of get bogged down. Mm-hmm. And to me, I don't really think you can move forward until you get past that.
What do you make of, like, what are your Louis C.K. thoughts?
Well, he was always an asshole. And I knew people who knew him, and he was always a jerk. He would treat people miserably. He treated Jimmy Fallon terribly and treated writers terribly. He's just an asshole. Why? I have no idea, but I think in the end, it caught up with him. And for him to be so entitled as to think that he could jerk off in front of anyone he wanted, it's just, no proper person does that. It's animalistic. And I think it's a real negative aspect of who he was, but I think it represents who he was. And I don't think it was an exception. I think it was just who this guy was. I never liked the guy. I think he's brilliant, but I think he's a total fucking asshole. And I think that eventually proved to be true.
Mm-hmm. I was listening to your podcast, which, by the way, is your podcast like, is it on hiatus or is it done?
No, it's on hiatus. It was just a lot of work, and I wanted to put out a few books and then go back to it.
Got it. So doing it with Sachs and Rob Schulte, which I didn't realize Rob Schulte was part of it. I know Rob. I like him. I was listening to the episode with, and I cannot believe I'm blanking on his name. I've read his books. John, he's from Wales. What is his name?
Oh, John Ronson?
Yes.
Love John Ronson.
Yeah.
Sweet guy. There's a case of a sweetheart who is out there doing it for the right reason.
But really it seemed, and I have not gotten to the end of it. So maybe if I had gotten to the end, I would amend my statement, but seemed a bit to be giving an apology for Alex Jones.
Well,
crazy that he's friends with him.
Well, this was years ago now. 3-4 years ago that interview took place. I think he, as a journalist, wanted to understand Alex Jones.
That's fair.
And I think what he was saying, and I think this is very accurate, is that, John is Jewish and obviously does not believe in what Alex Jones is saying, but he found himself liking Alex.
Yeah.
And that's a real problem because I have a lot of Jewish relatives who listen to him, who like Trump, who like GOP. And it interests me, why would you like that? What is it about that person that you like? And some of them are just seemingly likable. And off the air, Alex Jones is known to be a good person. He treats his coworkers well. He treats interviewers well. You know, he'll cook up a steak for you if you come over and interview him. So I think John was perplexed at why he felt he liked him. That was my sense. But I also think that if I were to interview John now, he would have a different take on it, because the problem is not who they are as a person and what they're like off the air, but what people believe when they are on the air. And for someone like that to come out and to call the shooting at the elementary school a false flag operation and to continue with that for years.
Yeah.
There's no excuse for that. I mean, that's just madness. And,
Right.
to me, it's like a rabid dog that just needs to be taken down. It's just, and whether Alex himself believes it or not, I don't even give a shit, because his believers believe it.
Right. That's the kind of the part that I was listening to most recently, was John was saying that his belief is that Alex Jones is speaking in metaphors. And you were pointing out, but it's not coming off that way. But he believes that they're metaphors.
Well, exactly. And that was the problem I had with Andrew Dice Clay. I mean, Andrew Dice Clay would say, I'm playing a character. Well, that may be the case, but if you're playing Madison Square Garden and you're telling jokes about 7-Eleven Indian workers being the color of urine, and your audience is giving you a standing ovation, they're not applauding the character.
Right.
They're applauding the fact that you are telling jokes about an Indian American working at 7-Eleven who has darker skin than we do. And that, to me, is the real difference. I mean, that's the problem too with trying to create a satirical character. And I had this problem too with this book, is that you have to sort of make it known that you don't believe, even if it's written in the first person, like this book is, you have to make it known that you do not abide by the philosophy of what this character is spouting.
How did you thread that needle?
I don't know. I mean, I really, in a lot of ways, you have to sort of go way off the path and just say, and just sort of imply this guy's a fucking moron. Really, this guy's an idiot. Because I have been confused with characters I've created who are satirical, and people have said, "Oh, you must believe this or that," and it's really the total opposite. It's just another way of satirizing something as you take over the mind in this character in the first person. And,
yeah, so just so listeners fully understand, this book is written by this guy who is a right-wing podcast host who feels that he's too spicy and his takes are too hot for the mainstream. And it's so funny. But it's, written in the first person, which is something you've done in a number of books. You've assumed the character of various characters. So also Stinker Lets Loose, right? Randy. Yep. What are the other ones that you've done in first person?
Oh, well, those are the main three.
Passable and Pink.
Passable and Pink, but those three that you mentioned are really the American male idiot. Mm-hmm. And I grew up with this in Maryland. I worked retail for 10 years. I grew up with people and I was friendly with people like this, who had very limited visions and knowledge, but they felt they were totally right. So with this new character, I wanted to sort of make fun of that with a lot of these memoirs that I've seen out there, whether it's Dennis Miller or whomever, in the first person, and just show through total ignorance on this person's part that I totally disagree with this mindset. And the problem with this type of character is it's a very confident, entitled moron. And I see it all the time in American politics. I grew up in DC. I know politics. I had friends whose parents were politicians and lobbyists and lawyers, and I just know this world, and it just drives me crazy because
the world of the confident moron. Because it's also from, now I haven't heard a ton of them, but from your podcast also has some like phone bits, spoofs. What would you, skits? I don't know what to call them. Bits where you I would say you play a confident a confident moron.
Yeah,
at times.
confident moron. Well, I mean, I see it on two ends. I see that, a GOP asshole, which, I grew up with, friends, parents, total confidence. These people, as we're getting on with our lives, just trying to create and be good as a parent or as a brother, sister, a wife, a husband, they're in these Northern Virginia meeting rooms trying to take down, the rights that women have fought for, or, minorities have fought for. This is their lives. So you have that end of it. And then on the other end, you have people who are confident morons, who are blue collar types, like the type I used to work with, who watch Fox or listen to Rush Limbaugh or whomever, who are so confident in their knowledge of the world and the country that there is no questioning. And, I worked with people like this who knew nothing about anything but would become experts on world events because they listened to Rush Limbaugh. So it's both the high end and the low end of this confident moron. And this character, Skippy Battison, sort of bridges both of them. I mean, he's an idiot who didn't do well in school, but his father's a lobbyist for the soda industry. So he's entitled and he gets whatever he wants. And basically he works his way up because his father pays for his, for the opportunity for him to do this. He gives him money and gives him places to stay. And I knew a lot of people like that. And there might be some resentment from my part because I didn't have that on my end. I didn't go to Harvard. I didn't graduate from the Lampoon, and my parents weren't rich and didn't know people. So it's sort of going after, in some ways, all the dickheads that I felt were advancing more quickly than I did after school.
Do you have a chip on your shoulder?
Yeah, I think everyone does. I mean, I totally have a chip on my shoulder. For many years, I was a lot angrier when it came to, these people, kids out of Harvard Lampoon who would get these jobs right away. But, the more you're out in the world, the more you see that, I did have it really good in a lot of ways. And no, I didn't get a job in comedy writing straight out of college, but did I deserve to do that? No. And I think I'm better off for having worked retail for 10 years, from 15 to 25. And I think the fact that I did what I did and did it on my own means more to me. And I think it becomes more meaningful as a comedy writer because I can use that experience where others may not have been able to use it. So when I was young, I had a tremendous chip on my shoulder, but that sort of disappeared over the years when you see how difficult life is pretty much for everyone.
Where did you work retail?
Kent Mill Records in Virginia and DC and Maryland. Actually, the same store chain that Ray Seahorn from Better Call Saul worked at. She worked in the Georgetown store. We've talked about this. And actually, Jesus, he's mentioned in the book a comic I love for some reason. He's from Northern Virginia. Oh, Patton Oswalt. I love Patton. Yeah. And I actually sent him a copy of the book. He worked in the competitor to where I worked. I worked at Kent Mill Records. He worked at Waxy Maxie's in Northern Virginia. So, but it's just one of those things that, because I worked in that world for 10 years, it gave me insight into a world that I think a lot of people who maybe went to Harvard or wherever don't have. And that is this type of person who's working for, at that time, $6, $7, $8 an hour, wearing, steel-toed chukka boots, who eat their lunches standing up, who don't have insurance, who don't have vacation. It just gave me an insight into that world, which all the characters that I've dealt with, except for Skippy, sort of are of that world. I always picture these characters as working retail for like, $10 an hour in Gaithersburg, Maryland, and living in a 1-bedroom apartment in these complexes where, that I used to see. So everything that I write is really based on that now. I mean, everything is sort of geared to that world, that very specific universe.
Mm-hmm. Well, listen, if they live in one of these apartments, they're going to need to make sure that their home is secure. And I'm sure you all know about the Ring video doorbell by now, but something you may not know, Ring makes an alarm.
That is the greatest segue ever.
I'm the queen of segues.
Holy shit.
That's right. I have been crowned and everything. I sit on a throne, a Segway throne. Ring makes an alarm. It's true. They make an alarm. Ring Alarm is an award-winning home security system with available professional monitoring when you subscribe. Best of all, you can easily install it yourself. And Ring didn't stop there. They've changed the home security game with Ring Alarm Pro. That's why I decided to work with Ring to put a ring of security around my home with the new Ring Alarm Pro. Ring Alarm Pro is next level security system. CNET calls Ring Alarm Pro a giant leap for home security, and after using it, I think they're totally right. Ring Alarm Pro helps secure my entire home and the Wi-Fi it runs on. With Ring Alarm Pro, Ring combined a home security system and a Wi-Fi router. So this thing helps protect your home and secure your network. So now I have a secure network with a crazy strong signal for all the devices across my home. And if you're anything like me, that's a lot of devices. Look, when we moved into this house, Daniel told me his dream of having a smart home with 1,000 million devices that you could control all by your phone. And I said, I don't know that I don't know. Do we need that? And now we have that, and it is cool. But the Ring Alarm Pro, that I'm pretty excited about. The smart home, again, but it's all secure because we have the Ring Alarm Pro. And we are going to be going on vacation, and I'm not going to tell you guys where, and I'm not going to tell you guys when, because I don't trust any of you. But the good thing is knowing that while we're gone, everything's secure, and we can keep an eye on it from wherever we are. And that's the kind of confidence and security you get with the Ring Alarm Pro. With a Ring Protect Pro subscription, which is an amazing deal, by the way, I get professional monitoring for the ultimate peace of mind. If anything happens, professional monitoring will call me and can request emergency services. You may not have known, but it's true. Ring has an award-winning alarm, and to protect my home, I've gone pro with Ring Alarm Pro. To learn more, go to ring.com/best friend. That's ring.com/best friend. I also want to tell you guys about BetterHelp. And I also want to tell you guys, and if you're watching the video version of this, youtube.com/Allison Rosen, you might be thinking, she's far too young to be putting on glasses for reading. What is she doing? Are those phony glasses? Yes, I'm 23 years old. I definitely don't need glasses to help me see. And I definitely didn't experience some kind of very confusing, blurriness when I took them off a second ago. Let's get back to BetterHelp. Allison Rosen is your new best friend is sponsored by BetterHelp Online Therapy. Relationships take work, especially the most important one you can have in your life, your relationship with yourself. A lot of us will drop anything to go help someone we care about. We'll go out of our way to treat other people well, but how often do we give ourselves the same treatment? You guys know I am a huge, I couldn't be where I am today without therapy. I'm a huge fan of therapy. I recommend therapy for anyone who is open to it. Just a therapy helps. I do therapy every single week. It helps me so much. I think you guys should try it. BetterHelp is online therapy that offers video, phone, and even live chat sessions with your therapist, so you don't have to see anyone on camera if you don't want to. It's much more affordable than in-person therapy, and you can be matched with a therapist in under 48 hours. Give it a try and see why over 2 million people have used BetterHelp online therapy. This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp, and Allison Rosen listeners get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/bestfriend. That's BetterHelp. BetterHelp.com/bestfriend. Again, that's betterhelp.com/bestfriend. Okay. And we're back. And I am concerned at my but therapy. You should try it. Might be a little too vague, but I feel like everyone knows what is involved in therapy. Mike Sachs, we're back with you. Hello.
Hello, therapy.
Everyone should try it. I do believe everyone should try it.
No, I totally agree with that. I suffered for many years, and I found therapy way too late.
How old were you when you found therapy?
Wow, I was early 30s.
Oh, wow.
And I in my family, it was not looked at as being anything to be respected. It was always looked down on. I mean, my mom was obsessed with medical, but it was always physical problems, never mental problems. And there was a pill for everything except for certain mental issues that needed to be addressed.
Right. So then in your early 30s, what finally got you in the door?
I was just tired, and I just, you live in New York, everyone is in therapy, so I thought I would give it a shot, and I'm glad I did. I went on medication for the first time. I went on serious medication, Wellbutrin and Prozac, which I'm still on the uppermost doses of each, and that helped.
Had you on your own had you kind of diagnosed yourself with like, oh yeah, I think I have depression, and like, what did you think was going on?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, I've had OCD, depression, anxiety since I was a kid, even too young to know what it was. And I eventually found, you just learn about it as you get older. But I do believe it's great when I hear about these kids who have OCD and anxiety and depression who get help at a very young age. I didn't have that, and I wish I did. My life would have been easier. I think that I've become who I've become because of having gone through that. So I don't blame anyone for that. I don't think any kid needs to go through this alone. It's a lot to go through.
So how does your OCD manifest, or how did it when you were younger?
Recurring thoughts, having to touch things in certain places, and also a very specific fear of getting sick while traveling. And that was really due to my mom, who was a hypochondriac and would insist that I was sick every time we went away and be taken to the doctor beforehand. So I can I can very specifically pinpoint where that one came from.
So she would take you to the doctor before you went on trips to what? Like make sure you were
Yeah, so I wouldn't be sick on the trip.
And then would the doctor do anything?
Well, I went to a doctor in Virginia, close to where I grew up, who my mother found, who prescribed for me medication that, looking back, I probably should not have been on, and that was codeine. I was on codeine for at least half of my childhood, always, not always, but for like half the month, each month I would be on this medicine, Phenergan, with codeine. Mm-hmm. Codeine was to suppress coughing, and Phenergan was an anti-nausea for the codeine. And I don't know. It's also murky. I don't know of other doctors who would prescribe that. She was looking for that and felt that was the only thing that could help me. So that is what I was on as a kid. And only until recently, when I mentioned that on various podcasts and such, people have got in touch and they said, what was a kid doing on codeine for half of his childhood? And did that affect who you are? And I really do think it did affect who I was, because I felt completely different, thinking wise, than other kids. And I'm sure there are other reasons for this as well, but being on codeine all the time did not help matters.
Yeah. It probably made you kind of zonked out, right?
Yeah. And I think it rewired my brain. I mean, I was on it. It was for, from the age of 6 until 17, half that time. So years I was on this stuff. And
but what symptoms was it supposedly treating?
Well, my mom had a phobia of pneumonia, and she had pneumonia as a kid.
Oh.
And her big fear was that I would come down with pneumonia, which I never did, but I did have croup cough a lot, and I did get sick with colds a lot, like most kids. So that was her way of treating it, was putting me on this medication, which is interesting because my daughter, knock on wood, I took her to the doctor a year ago, and the doctor was amazed that she had only been on antibiotics once. And I was on antibiotics all the time. Mm-hmm. This doctor was really like my mom's Dr. Nick, the doctor for Elvis. And he would prescribe whatever she wanted. And, she would put me on it. Now, I'm not angry at her for doing that. It just perplexes me. She's not around anymore. Like, I can't really ask her. But as a parent now, it's something that I would never do to my own daughter.
Yeah. Was she on a lot of medications as well?
She was on a lot. Yeah, she was on a lot of medications, everything but medications that she should have been on. She was manic and depressive and anxious, and she should have been on medication for that, but she wasn't. For her, it was always it always manifested itself in physical ways. So she was always sick with something, but looking back now, I think it was because of mental issues.
I mean, I guess it's like, and perhaps this is being too forgiving, but it's like the anti-vaxxers, I don't agree with their decisions at all, but what they think they're protecting their kids. They think they're making the correct, like your mom was not doing right by you, but what she thought she was doing was keeping you safe.
That's right. And, she came up in a different generation where her parents escaped the Holocaust, and there were certain worries that she was given from her parents, where if you did get sick where they grew up, her parents, you could likely very well die.
Right.
And you had to prevent certain things. So I'm not in any way upset or mad at her at all. It's just it just perplexes me a little bit that she felt I would have to be on this, and it's something that I want to break. I don't want my daughter to have to go through that.
What country did her parents escape from?
From Lithuania and Latvia.
Where was your dad in all of this?
Well, that's an interesting question. I mean, he was a great guy, but in a lot of ways, he was, he was sort of a pushover when it came to certain things. And if my mom said I was sick, then I was sick, and that was it. And, he would have to take me to the doctor. I think, in retrospect, he should have stepped in and said no, but, I can't fault him. He had, he was wonderful in a lot of ways. So I hear a lot of people my age who complain about their parents, but they're still alive. Mine aren't. So I just really, more than anything, just miss them. Yeah.
That must have been hard to lose them.
Yeah, it was. I mean, at any age, it was tough. And that was also why I was going through a separation.
Oh.
But what's interesting is that my parents passed away, and I went through a separation or divorce. But it was really only then that I felt, you know what, fuck it. I'm going to do whatever I want to do, however I want to do it. And that's when I started writing these books, these fake novelizations and these fake found items. It was sort of freeing at a certain point, because it shows you that life is short. And I didn't have to impress anyone anymore. And I just thought, fuck it. Here, I'm just going to put out what I want, and I don't really give a shit what anyone thinks. And that was very freeing. That came about 7-8 years ago now. It was a real schism between the earlier period and that period, where before I would put out books, but I would do it through traditional publishing, or I would write articles for Esquire or GQ or Vanity Fair, and not necessarily on things I wanted to write. But after that, I felt, there's no time to do work on something I don't want to work on. And I'm not going to work on something that's going to take a year of my time and that I'm not completely happy with. So even if it's just for me and a few readers and I'm not making much money, that's what I'm going to do.
So was it because you were suddenly confronted with mortality?
I think so. And also there was a freedom too of not being married to someone who was not understanding of what I was trying to do. And, you do hear about this with comedians, and I'm not in any way comparing myself to this, but when you read about George Carlin or Lenny Bruce or Woody Allen, there's always a period or Richard Pryor where they're doing something comedically, and then they reach a point where they say, you know what, this isn't me. And I want to do what I want to do. And it's only at that point that they really explode. And again, I'm not comparing myself in any way to them. I mean, they were geniuses. But in my case, I knew enough about their lives to know that I needed to stop trying to appease other people and with articles and books that didn't really interest me, and just to do what interested me, even if it was, strange or weird, or, if parents might not understand it or friends might not understand it. So it was really sort of a a gift in a way. It's like, all right, here you go. You're still young enough to do this, but old enough to know that there's not that much time left. So you really do have to take advantage of what's out there, and you really do have to appease yourself, even if it's not through money, because in the end, I know a lot of people who make a lot of money in comedy and they're miserable. And it's really only when you can produce what you want to produce that you feel free. And I did anyway.
I've been thinking a lot about that lately. I've just been thinking about what is it that I spend my time doing, and what is it that I want to spend my time doing, and how can I sort of reprioritize it? Because right now, like so many people in the pandemic, there's just no boundaries on my work. And I am lucky to be able to, my work is something that I love doing, but it is very amorphous and diffuse, and I would rather sort of get some boundaries around it and figure it out so that I'm not just kind of like sitting in front of my computer all day being distracted by like, what was I trying to do? Like, I think there's a way to work smarter, to use a buzzword.
Yeah, it's not easy to do that because it's very solitary existence. This book, Passing on the Right, took me a year to write. And a lot of days I would get up and think, what the fuck am I doing writing this book that may not make any sense? It's 450 pages. What is the purpose of this? And it's only when you reach the end that you can see that there's a purpose. But I think you reach a certain point in your career where you know not to stop. That even if you don't understand it, you know that you have to keep going forward. Is
your writing fairly linear? Did you start with the beginning of the book?
Oh yeah, always. But it's never plotted out. It's never outlined.
Oh, you don't do an outline?
No, I don't. And that's, I think, a fallacy with a lot of writers who feel that they're taught that they have to do an outline. I never do. I kind of know where I want to go, but I kind of look at it as like driving a car on a rural road, and you see as far as the headlights, and you don't really see beyond that. You know where you want to end up, but I don't think you really should see beyond that. I think there's an excitement where if you don't know where you're going, the reader's not going to know either. And I've always found plotting it out as being very limiting to me. It sort of takes away from the creativity.
Yeah. Do you know Noelle Hancock?
Noelle? No, I don't.
Okay. She was a writer in New York, and then she moved to somewhere tropical. She might be back in New York now. But yes, she had said something similar about like writing a novel. She had like a train going through a tunnel, like you only kind of see right directly in front of you. But yeah, and I am not an outline person. And whenever I sit down to write something, wherever I end up I never knew I was headed there. So outlines for me have been very difficult, but also structuring long form is very difficult for me.
Well, it's difficult for everyone. But the problem too is I found that when you are being taught this in college, you're being taught by professors who aren't out in the real world making a living at what they're teaching. And oftentimes they're telling you to do things that won't work for you. And you really have to teach yourself what's going to work and not work. And I think that is a problem with a lot of MFA programs is this is a type of thing where you have to learn it, but you have to teach yourself in the end. And I just taught myself that plotting it out like my teachers taught me in college to do doesn't work for me. And there's nothing wrong with not doing or doing it opposite of what your teachers taught you. In fact, I think that's a good thing. So I think there does have to be a fuck you among writers out there. Like, okay, I was taught this way, but it doesn't work for me. But you know what? Fuck you. This is the way I'm going to do it. And there's no right or wrong way except the way that works for you. And if it works for you, then don't plot it out. Or if it does work for you, then plot it out. But you really do have to teach yourself what works and what doesn't work.
Oh, I have more questions about that, but just picking right up on that spirit. Listen, do you identify as crypto curious? If you've thought about entering the world of cryptocurrency, but felt a little overwhelmed, Coinbase makes learning to buy and sell simple. Look, I think cryptocurrency is pretty interesting. I find it daunting, but I'm excited to learn more about it with Coinbase. They make it so easy to check it all out in one place. They offer a trusted and easy to use platform to buy, sell, and spend cryptocurrency. They support the most popular digital currencies on the market and make them accessible to everyone. They offer portfolio management and protection, learning resources, and a mobile app so you can trade securely and monitor your crypto all in one place. Millions of people in over 100 countries trust Coinbase with their digital assets, whether you're looking to diversify, just getting started, or searching for a better way to access crypto markets. Start today with Coinbase. For a limited time, new users can get $10 in free Bitcoin when you sign up today at Coinbase.com/Allison. Sign up at Coinbase.com/Allison for $10 in free Bitcoin. This offer is for a limited time only, so be sure to sign up today. That's Coinbase.com/Allison. Okay, so Mike, what is your daily writing routine, if you have one?
Yeah, I get up early and I put my daughter off, make her breakfast, get her off to school, and get started immediately. And that's usually like 8 a.m. And I'll just work until I'm tired. At a certain point, you're not producing, so I think you need to stop. But I think working entails not necessarily writing in front of a computer. It can be going and taking a walk and thinking about something, or it can be taking a day off and doing research or networking. As long as one is creating and moving forward, I think that is what one should do. So I always try to move forward every day, whether it's, from a business sense of writing or a creative sense. But I do, because of my OCD, I have to write at least, a few hours every day. And that's every day. That's the weekend. That's holidays. That's New Year's Eve. I mean, it's just every day. And that's just what helps me. And I think I'm lucky in that sense, because I do know people with OCD who have to touch, light bulbs in certain places, or have to lick this, or have to do that. And I do think that there is an association, a connection between OCD and creativity. And I also think that there is an energy to it, which I've tried to use to my advantage. I actually reached out to Dr. Oliver Sachs, no relation, about the connection between OCD and comedy, because through the people that I interviewed, I maybe interviewed, say, 70 people, and 35 made the final cut of the books. I would say 70-80% had OCD.
So interesting. Yeah,
because I knew anxiety and depression was there, but I didn't know about OCD. And the only reason I asked was because I have it. And I knew David Sedaris had it because he's written about it. So I asked him. And so I started asking people, and they mostly said that they did have it. So I'm wondering if it just wires your brain in a different way, where you look differently at the world, where it's almost an advantage to people, where having gone through the hell of having it as a kid, you can now use it to your advantage in a creative sense.
What did he say?
He didn't know of any connection. He hadn't heard of any. He found it interesting that there might be. Through no scientific experimentation or studies on my own, I do believe that there is a connection in two ways. One is that your brain is wired differently, that you think differently. And two, that if you can train yourself to use that energy where you get uncomfortable if you don't do something every day, in this case, writing, you can use that to your advantage, where you really produce, if you work every day, you can produce a lot. Mm-hmm. Even if it's 3 pages a day, you can produce 200-300 page books in a year, so it's a very powerful energy. And I think one can harness it. And it took me years to do and to even think about this, but I think one can do that. And if one does do that, a lot can be created from that.
Do you take naps?
No.
Do you go to bed early?
I do. I go to bed no later than 11.
That's good. What are you working on now?
I am working on a book that is about the marketing of this book, Passing on the Right, I did what I always tell people not to do, young writers not to do, and I hired a PR person.
Ooh, I have noticed that you have been on social media posting little PR things.
And people think that's fake. That is not fake. That is real. And I spent a lot of money for this person who shall go unnamed, and everything that you read is real. So it's just basically a collection of dialogue between me and this person that I hired, who never, even after we worked together for 2 months, really came to understand what he was selling, which hopefully will make for an entertaining book.
I cannot believe these are all real.
Yeah, they are.
I think I think I read these and then I reached out. I read these at the beginning. I wasn't sure. And I was like, oh, I think maybe you're encountering some speed bumps in the process of trying to promote Passing on the Right. So I emailed you and I said, hey, do you want to come on my show and talk about the book? And then the more I read them, I'm like, no, this is a bit you're doing. I had no idea these were real.
These are real.
So you hired this person and you're getting a book out of it.
Yeah, so hopefully I'll get some money out of it. I mean, this is not cheap. And
it's crazy expensive.
Man, marketing a book is a subject that you mentioned I have 9 books. That's true. I have 9 books out and I'm going to have 10 by the end of the year. And I still don't understand marketing. It's very murky to me. I use a metaphor of, you want the book to reach cruising altitude, but to get it to cruising altitude, what does one have to do? It's a very mysterious process to me. And I thought by taking that route of hiring someone, it would make it easier. And all it did was make it harder for me to make money off this book, because you're in the hole a certain amount from hiring this person. But from being on the other end of it, having worked at Vanity Fair as an editor, I know firsthand that marketers of books don't know what the fuck they're doing typically, where they will send magazines books that have no connection to that magazine. And the problem in the past was that you would get all these review copies and they would just end up being sold to the Strand, or to used bookstore or to bookstores.
Right.
And it would get out there before the book even came out. So it's something I'm still trying to figure out, is how does one sell a book? Now, the answer might be there are certain books that people just don't want to buy. You cannot sell. And especially if they're confusing, especially if there's no elevator pitch. And with this current book, I mean, it's doing well, but it's only because of certain people putting out the good word about it. But it's not a book you can just say, oh, this is what it's about. It's not a parody book. It's not a humor book you would find in Barnes & Noble where it's fake tweets from Trump or historical Facebook posts or something simple, or cats versus dogs. It's a little more complicated. And when you get more complicated, when you get more satirical, especially when it's in the first person, especially when your name isn't on it. My name is nowhere on this book.
Right.
It's a hard sell.
And yet I bet if Marjorie Taylor Greene or something were to write some and it wouldn't be good, but it'd be like a first person, alfalfa eating kindergarten teacher's manifesto or something, they would sell 1,000 copies of their quote unquote humor book. I mean, 1,000, 1,000,000.
Yeah, 1,000,000. I mean, that's the thing with comedy, is that I think that the more intelligent the idea, the harder it is to, first of all, get an agent for it. And second of all, have that agent sell it to a publisher. And third of all, to sell it to the public. I mean, I think people's satirical and humor IQs have dropped. Where in the early 70s or the 60s, you would have black humor, dark humor, National Lampoon, slash and burn type humor. That doesn't exist anymore. And you have to be very clear cut in what you're trying to say. And I think if you go out of that bubble, it just confuses people. I'm hoping that changes, but it is a hard sell. Now, again, I don't have to make as much money because I don't have an agent, and I'm putting this out under my own imprint. So I get more per book than I would if it was through traditional publishing. but it's a hustle, and it's a part of a writer's job. At least 40% it's a business, and you have to think about it as a business and market it as such. And it's an everyday struggle. I mean, how do you rise above the stimuli of everything out there? Not just books, but podcasts, TV shows, music, movies, everything. How do you compete with that? And it's something I've been doing it for 25 years. I'm still trying to figure it out. It's still murky to me.
Well, where should they go to buy the book?
You can get it anywhere. I mean, you can get it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, independent sites. It's available online in hard copy, digital, and I did the audio version myself. I read it. That'll be coming out in next month or so.
Okay. Interviewer to interviewer. Have you interviewed anyone who was just a real dick?
Yes.
If you'd like to say who that is.
Yeah, I don't care. She actually died. I was just talking about her. She Ann Batty. She was a writer for SNL, and actually Carrie Fisher portrayed her on 30 Rock. And she was really the only person where I basically hung up on her. I just couldn't deal with her. I mean, she was just so rude, which is, unfortunate, because for any of these interviews, I do 20 to 30 hours of preparation. So I did a tremendous amount of preparation on her. And, she was an early National Lampoon writer and then early SNL writer. She was the girlfriend of Michael O'Donoghue. And I think, speaking of chips on shoulder, I think she had one because I don't think she wrote as much as she claimed she did. I think it was Michael O'Donoghue. And it was just a meanness. And I've reached that point where I don't want to deal with mean people.
Yeah.
And I don't care how brilliant you are. I don't really give a shit if you treat me, I'm not Mr. Sensitive either, but if you're so rude that I can't get any answers out of you. And that was a case where I ended the interview after 10, 15 minutes. Now, in a lot of cases where if an interview doesn't work, it usually has to do with the opposite reason, where they're too modest or they don't have an ego enough to talk about themselves. So when an interview didn't work, which would happen quite often, it would be not because they were rude, but because they were too nice. They didn't want to talk about themselves. But in that specific case, it was a total meanness. And there's also people that I didn't even go after because I knew that they were not good to interview, whether it was Woody Allen, Albert Brooks, Christopher Guest, or whomever. I just have I don't have any interest in that. I don't want to wrangle someone to do an interview and then wrestle them into telling me something. I just don't give a shit. There's plenty of talent out there where I don't have to deal with assholes.
Mm-hmm. Have you ever had this experience, which I just talked about this last week, which I have asked other interviewers this. No one has ever said, yes, I know what you mean. And I always expect someone will. But if I read someone's book, if it's a memoir, and I don't mean like a Skippy memoir, but like a straightforward memoir, if I read their book and then I interview them and there's not enough time that has passed between it, I actually find that it stymies me because any question I could think to ask, I pretty much already know the answer to. And then I'm worried. Have you had this?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, thank God. So. I truly have never encountered another person who has said, yes, I know what you mean. And it makes me feel like, why is it just me?
That's a problem. And that is one of the reasons I don't interview certain people, because there needs to be enough to ask. And if there's not enough to ask, let me tell you something. If you're trying to fill a long interview, a Playboy length interview, and you're struggling to ask them, you should always have too many questions. And if you have too few, the interview will not work. I find,
I mean, this is lately for me, it's only ever podcasts where this comes up, but I find as long as I just let enough time elapse between when I read the book and the interview, then at least I will have like forgotten all the the extreme detail that'll make me unable to answer to ask the questions, but oftentimes I'm like cramming, so it'll be like I finished it, an hour before, and then I'm like, I know the answer to every single thing I would want to ask.
Well, that's the problem with writers. I mean, in a lot of ways, we lead very uninteresting lives, and if you read a book that answers all the questions that you want to ask, it's a problem. And there's a very few amount of people that you can get a full-length Playboy length interview out of, and a lot of it, a lot of the times it didn't work out was because there just wasn't enough material there. One needs a tremendous amount of material to fill an interview like that. And that's what I'm doing now for New Yorkers. I'm doing these long, lengthy interviews. And I found that it's hard to find people who, you need a certain amount of experience, but you also need to not have been interviewed too often, because if you have been, you always answer the same question. You see it across numerous interviews. They sort of memorize these questions and these answers, and you want something different.
Do you pitch people for that, or do they assign you?
No, I pitch people. I mean, I went after John Swartzwelder, who I've been going after him for years, since the first book of interviews that I put out, And Here's the Kicker. And he was very, very nice and gracious, and he said no in a very friendly, nice way. And then he said no for the second book. And it was only when I interviewed him for the New Yorker he said yes, not because of me, but because he grew up reading the New Yorker. So it was really the New Yorker's name rather than my name that eventually enticed him to say yes.
Right. That's amazing. Now that must make you feel good to be in the New Yorker.
Well, yeah, it definitely does. But I didn't read the New Yorker until I was out of college. I didn't know from it. I mean, it wasn't around the house, I can assure you. And I remember when I first read it, I was like 23, 24. But yeah, I mean, it's just the fact that I'm in it is incredible, because I was never on the fast track to anything. I mean, I never won awards. I never wrote for the school paper. I never wrote for anyone. So the fact that I can write and pitch to New Yorker is incredible. I never would have envisioned that.
That's so cool. Mike Sachs, so we have a segment called Just Me or Everyone.
Yep.
Do you have a Just Me or Everyone?
I do.
Sometimes I ponder on something I have thought or done. Is it just me or everyone?
Let's hear it.
All right, because honestly, I've never brought this up before.
Oh, ooh, hot scoop.
Okay, so I'm in my 40s. I'm 47, right? I go for a lot of walks. And I wouldn't say every time, but I would say a lot. When I pass a couple, I'll think, are they doing it? And my question is, do other people think this? Because I'm in my 5th decade. And is that even appropriate anymore when I see a couple to wonder if they're fucking? And does it even matter? I mean, why do I think that? What does this say about me?
I love that you're admitting this. But the question I'm wondering is, and I don't find myself thinking that very often. I think I probably at one point did wonder that when I was younger, but are you like, is the question, are they still doing it? Or is the question like, are they at the point in their relationship that they are doing? Okay.
Yeah.
So the question is,
are they doing it? Not have they done it in the past and stopped and started again, but are they right now? Like, have they come from just having done it?
Oh, I see. Are they fresh from coitus?
Or just, are they doing it at this point in their relationship? Like, have they reached that point where they're due? And just I don't know, man. I mean,
who calls it doing it?
Yeah. Who calls it doing it? But
I mean, I did when I was like I remember in 3rd grade when someone would say do it or doing it. It was so funny.
3rd grade?
Yeah.
Wow, that's early. No, to
Really?
me it was, yes.
And that's when do it and doing it was like the funniest thing ever, because anyone would say do it and it was like like tons of guffaws.
Right. So
titters.
I'm 47. I'm not 7 anymore, and I'm still wondering this. But I mean, do you wonder that if you pass a couple and you don't know if they're friends or in a relationship, do you wonder, I wonder if they're doing it?
I don't think I think about that very often anymore. But look, it's just, I think I am, the peak for me to wonder about other people's sexuality is low right now.
Why
it's inverted. It's inverted.
Is it? You don't care
because I just
anymore?
said peak and then I described like a nadir. So I personally don't, but you can't be the only one. There's people who are going to write in who are like, yes, I wonder about that all the time.
Now, it may have been all the codeine I took as a kid. I don't
Maybe.
know.
Yeah.
But, that's what I thought of immediately when I saw this question.
In general, do you find yourself thinking that they are or they aren't, or you're just curious about it?
I just wonder like an 8-year-old, because I think in some ways I'm very immature and I'm very private in a lot of ways. And I never really talked to friends about it. And I just like wonder if it's going on. It's like that scene in Dazed and Confused where one of the characters was up in the moon tower and he looked out over in Austin and he said, I wonder how many people are now doing it. That's sort of what it's like, I guess. I live a very insular life. I mean, I write all day alone. People read these alone. It's a solitary life. I love, I'm sort of a solitary person, but there is a hunger sort of to know what people are doing out there and what they're thinking.
I will say when older, not super older, but like on the older side of the reproductive years couples, all of a sudden, like, surprise pregnancy. I didn't know I could get pregnant anymore. When that happens, I'm like, look at you guys still doing it, So that happens for sure.
Exactly. Like when I see a pregnant person, I always just think she did it. I know she did. I know she did it.
Someone did it. Yeah. I remember, and this had to have been fun for my parents. I remember announcing to them, you guys did it 3 times, because they have my sister and me. Right. And then I knew that my mom had a miscarriage before me. So I announced this and they just let that one.
Yeah. My brother once said to my parents, did you two screw? Now, he was 25 when he asked. So. No, he was like 8.
And then do you have a hey, go fuck yourself?
Yeah. 2 things. One has to do with the book, which is Ted, any GOP motherfuckers. And I found myself, I grew up, as I said, around DC. I know this type, but in the past 7-8 years, it's just gotten toxic. And whether it's Ted Cruz or whether it's Jordan, whatever his name is, I just despise them. I hate them, whether they believe what they're saying or not, because I have a lot of relatives and I know a lot of people who believe this shit. And I think it's just destructive. And, Marjorie Taylor Greene's a fucking moron. She's an idiot. And it has nothing to do with not having gone to college, or she just has no academic interest in anything. And that's one of the reasons why I wrote this book, just a hatred for these sons of bitches. That's one. And the other thing is peppercorn. I hate peppercorn.
Hey, go fuck yourself.
I hate it.
Do you hate pepper?
I don't like pepper. I don't like salt, but there's something about pepper. I had as a kid peppercorn soup, and I never. It was.
Was it a cream-based situation?
No, it wasn't. It was like a vegetable, like a chicken. It was something I had at a friend's house, and I never forgot it. And anytime anything has any peppercorn on it, I just about go crazy.
I don't like peppercorn either. I feel like it's just like anytime you bite into it, it's just an explosion of pain in your mouth.
Yes, right. Do you want that when you eat? Isn't eating supposed to be about pleasure? Do I want to eat something hard that tastes like shit? No.
Yeah, I don't understand. But I also don't understand like steak au poivre, which I'm probably butchering anything with like a big chunk of pepper in the sauce. No, thank you.
Yeah, it's the mosquitoes of food. I mean, there's no reason for it. It doesn't need to exist.
I feel like we could have done the whole episode on just this.
I mean, doing it in peppercorns.
That's right. It was so nice having you on the show.
Allison, I love it. I love you. And I thank you so much for having me on. When you asked, I was really happy because I've been asked to do not a lot, but quite a few podcasts. But I love yours and I love you, and I really appreciate you even reaching out.
Thank you so much. So tell everyone again, so they can get Passing on the Right and your other books wherever books are found. I will link to it in the episode summary. Tell them where they can follow you and your website and all that stuff. Anything else?
Yeah, thanks. MikeSachs.com, and I'm on Twitter, Mike B. Sachs, and on Instagram. And email me, mikebsachs@gmail.com. I love getting emails. I mean, that's another pet peeve when I reach out to people and email them and writers and they never get back. Like, what the fuck are you doing? Of course you want to. I mean, it's a lonely business. And if you write me, I will write you back. I mean, it's very simple. So if you want to write me, mikebsachs@gmail.com, I will write back to you. I may even be friends with you. I mean,
he made that promise on my show, so
Goddamn right
that he'll uphold his word.
I'm not fudging around here. This is the real deal, sweetheart.
If you see someone and you wonder, are they doing it? Two people specifically. Actually, you know what? Why limit it? If you see some situation and you think, are they doing it? You email Mike B. Sachs.
Actually, if you could take a picture of this couple and then send it to me.
Yeah, and then he'll weigh in. Ooh, yes. Pictures, and then everyone can weigh in on whether people are doing it.
Yes, I'll have the definitive answer. You send me the picture of the couple, I'll answer the question for you.
Oh my God,
life is delicious, isn't it?
Forward it to me because I want to know. I want to know what your definitive answer was. Yes. Yes, you guys, I'm on patreon.com/Allison Rosen. It's where you go. Bonus episodes of The Friend Zone. That's my Patreon podcast. All sorts of rewards, fun stuff. If you sign up for an annual subscription, you get 2 months free. So 12 months for the price of 10. And if you like what you're hearing, please make sure, even if you don't, make sure you're subscribed or following or whatever they call it in your app of choice. I trust that you guys know how podcasts in apps work and things like that. Make sure to leave us a nice comment, a nice review. It really helps out the show. And follow me on social media @Allison Rosen and check out my other shows, Upworthy Weekly and Childish. And thank you again, Mike. This was so much fun. And listeners, thank you again for listening. I love you. You matter. Goodbye.
Hey, do you know about the Allison Rosen Show?